live stream. Yeah, that's how they're saving their backup of the presentations. Nobody has access to live streams, it just automatically records it to YouTube. So I'll stop sharing.
Here for me to share?
Yep, you can share whenever.
How are you?
Get started sharing. Pop up on our projector as well. Okay, I'm just gonna share. You can get started whenever you would like.
And get started here. It looks like it is right on 3:30. So welcome to everybody that's here with us today, the hardy folks that have made it, to the end of the day here. Your brain's not totally full and spilling out your ears. Maybe it is, but you're hiding it well. So good job on that. We'll be doing this session again first thing in the morning. So if you missed something right now, you can come back in the morning after you've had your coffee. If you think of a question or a big idea comes up that you hadn't asked about before. But if you made it into the room, you saw the marquee on the front, and we have the slide here. I've added something to it, though, about digital up there. Previously, I just sort of marketed this as virtual learning accessibility, kind of given that access, that short kind of fun way the cool kids are saying accessibility to your division's learning management system and your instructional materials. And I think the information that you're going to get from this session may have been really great last year, but you're going to find a number of different applications for, like a lot of things that we discovered last year, that you can take forward into this year, into the school years going forward too. A few things about me as we get started. We were kind of chatting here since we have a small group in the class right now. Ahead of time, I'm not a big Beatles fan, more a Rolling Stones guy, but that's okay. I'm going to toss the Beatles folks out on that. I'm Matt Newton. I'm the technology coordinator at the TTAC at Virginia Tech. Lots of letters and email addresses and things like that go along with those things. But if you want to take that down sometime, whoa, I'm moving all around. To contact me after this, or if you have questions, please don't hesitate to be able to do that. And I can also say too, what I'm really excited about is that you all, even though we have a small group here and some folks online as well, this is my first time doing any PD in person since probably VISTI or ATIA of 2019, early 2020. So I don't know if any of you are these folks up there, whether you might be picking your nose, hopefully nobody with no pants on or blah, 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 or here by mistake or on Facebook and all of that. But it is nice to see faces and eyes to be able to stand here and do this again today. And no offense to you folks that are joining us by Zoom. We love you too. We know you're on there listening as well. Thanks for being here. It's just exciting for me to be back in person. Something I do lots and lots and lots of PD in the role that I have is sort of the job. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So I'm so tired of doing Zoom PD, so tired of it. So it's so great to see folks to be able to do that again. And I mentioned the folks in here earlier. I am a Roanoke local. I do live here. I like when this conference is at the beach because I get to go somewhere, but there's nice parts about it being local too, and that I live about 7 stoplights away. Sleep in my own bed at night, run and pick up something if I need it. But I tell you this, so if you need restaurant suggestions, places to go tonight, if you don't happen to be from around here, let me know. I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. There's a lot of great stuff here. Also let you know too, just really quickly, these are my 2 daughters, 7 and 4, at the pumpkin patch here just a few months ago. I am totally used to answering questions, as you might imagine. I get question, why this and that all day long. I'm very used to being interrupted as well. So please don't hesitate to say, what did you just say? Can you explain that to me again? A little less personal information, but at the beginning there, I mentioned that I work for TTAC. And the gentleman, the presentation coordinator who just came in here asked, what is that? And it's an acronym. You know how we love acronyms in education, right? For Training and Technical Assistance Center. And there are 8 of these around the state, and maybe from a region that is more local to you than Virginia Tech and Radford University, where we are here right now. But the TTACs receive grant funding from the Department of Ed. Yes, it says VDOE on my name tag here, to provide professional development, to provide consultative services to teachers, administrators, and staff in the public schools that are in our regions to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. And we have about 16 different coordinators that work in my office, and all of us have different specialties. Mine happens to be technology, I'm an ITRT here in Roanoke, and a special ed teacher before I do what I do now. So that's kind of where I focus on. I think I'm able to blend that background fairly well to be able to talk to folks that use IT quite a lot to reach those students and improve their outcomes. So the great thing about the TTACs, our services are free. We have lending libraries of books and tools and things like that. You can reach out to the one that is in your area, and there will be somebody that is very similar to me in my role that can help you if you have questions to be able to do that. But we'll get into the long introduction there to what we'll talk about today. A little bit more of the agenda. I'm a very executive function needing person. I like to see an agenda and the bullet points of the objectives of what we're going to talk about on the board, particularly when we have a late afternoon session and you might be wondering when I'm going to be wrapping up, right? So now I'm giving you the roadmap to what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start talking about what is online management system, learning management system accessibility, what it is. We're going to do the what. We'll look at the why it's important that your LMS is accessible. I think you probably know the answer to that, but we'll say it out loud anyway. How can you check the accessibility of your LMS? There are ways that you can do that. And then kind of the thing, I'm burying the lead by making it the 4th bullet, but how, if your LMS is accessible, and kind of the secret here is that probably yours is without you even having to do anything about it. Now what? And the hint there is going to be aim high. Anybody have a guess what AIM stands for? Another education acronym. All right, we'll leave that for a minute and see where we get. So let's get into first LMS accessibility. And you see some different logos on the board here of probably, I would say, the 6 most common learning management systems in schools across Virginia. We've got what? Google Classroom, we've got Schoology, we've got Blackboard, Canvas, Virtual Virginia, and Moodle. Does cover everybody? Anybody have anything else? Anything more home cooked than that?
Microsoft Teams.
What did you say?
Microsoft Teams.
Teams, yep. I haven't used Teams as an LMS before, so that's a new one on me. You'll have to talk to me a little bit about that.
That's what we had before Canvas.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know here in Roanoke, they may have changed, and I think Brett Simmons is on listening to me talk here. They used Moodle for quite a while. They may have moved to something else now. I know that Google Classroom in our neck of the woods here in Southwest Virginia is very common. I think about 32 of the 34 school divisions.
They're using Canvas.
They're using Canvas now? That's right. That's right. Way to go, Brett. But no more Moodle servers, but they're using Canvas now to do that. About 34 out of 32 or 34 of our school divisions use Google Classroom, so it's very common down here to be able to do that. We've a few people pop up with Schoology and Blackboard, not so much. I've heard a lot about Blackboard in Northern Virginia. Seems to be common up in the Fairfax area. And I know some folks are looking at some of these other ones as well. But when we talk about accessibility, there's definitely usually 2 different types of accessibility. When we think about what happened last year when students were pushed out remotely, we were thinking about how can they just get access to our LMS? How do we get computers to them? How do we get internet access to them? How do we allow them to connect from home, from the library? If we're parking school buses in a neighborhood and they can walk up with a device or something like that, how can they get access to where their learning materials are going to be housed. That's one type of accessibility. The other type of accessibility that I work on primarily now is, what if you're a student with a disability? What if you're a student with visual impairment? What if you're a student with hearing impairment or a mobility impairment? You can't use a mouse or a touchpad, something like that. How are these LMSs rolled out? How accessible are they to somebody who can't interface with it in the traditional manner? How do we do that? And when we think about this, I want you to think about the LMS, whatever it is you use, Microsoft Teams, Moodle, Canvas now here in Roanoke. I want you to think about the acronym POUR. I'm just alphabet soup with what I'm talking about here today, okay? Should have had a can of alphabet soup up there. But POUR is an acronym that breaks down into these 4 categories. And these are ways that you can assess your learning management system for how accessible it will be to an individual with a disability. You can ask yourself first the P. And the P for POUR is perceivable. When we talk about perception, we're thinking a lot about sensory stuff, right? Can we see it? Can we hear it? If something is in color coded on the page, if I'm colorblind, can I perceive that? Maybe not, right? So asking yourself how perceivable it is. O is for operable, and we're not performing any operations on anybody, but thinking about somebody who might not be able to interact or interface with your LMS using the keyboard on their laptop or on a touch screen, if you're using an iPad or a tablet like that. Does it have ways that they can move through, make selections, navigate through your LMS, even if they're not doing it in the traditional way? Understandable. Ooh, can of worms with this one right here. You may have a very perceivable, a very operable LMS, but when you look at it, is it understandable? When you look at the homepage of Canvas, perhaps, and you've got a whole bunch of things down the side, you have your assignments, your quizzes, your modules, your calendar, everything that goes along the side of that. Is it clear to the user, maybe somebody who has a cognitive disability, what they're supposed to be doing when they go to that page, how they navigate and how they move through? Take a drink of coffee, keep my energy up this time of day too. And then last but not least, robust, the R that's up there. And robust is not a description of how we're all going to feel after we spend 3 days eating Hotel Roanoke snacks and food for, out on demand. Whenever we walk out in the hallway, there's wonderful cookies and chips and wraps and coffee, although we might feel that way. Robust in this context is it going to work across different platforms, your learning management system? If I open it in Safari, does it behave the same way as if I open it in Chrome? If I look at it at a mobile device versus a desktop computer, is it going to respond the same way? Am I going to be able to figure it out? What's going on with it? So keeping this in mind, I keep bumping my buttons. Did I tell you that I haven't presented in front of people in a while? So I'm holding my clicker now, and I don't know what's going on. I have to get this muscle memory back to be able to do that. We can think about POUR when we look at Canvas. And I have this Canvas page up here to look at. This is just a Virginia Tech Canvas page. It's what we use for students in-house at Virginia Tech as well. But I wanted to pull you out just a little bit and take you down in the technology weeds for a minute, looking at an actual Canvas page that we have. And I think you can see it up there. I'm going to move my guidance thing here out of the way. I want to take you just real briefly through looking at a Canvas page through the eyes of POUR, what we just talked about, okay? First example was P. What was P for?
Perceivable.
Perceivable, right? Good memory, everybody. I ask grown-ups that. If I ask a pre-K or kindergarten class what P was for, we might have got a very different answer, but thankfully we have all grown-ups in the room on that. But P in this context is for perceivable. And when we talk about perception, again, we're thinking about sensory needs. So I'm going to kind of scale this down a little bit and talk about this web page in terms of if I was somebody with visual impairment. If I'm a student with visual impairment going on this Canvas page, I might be using a software like JAWS NVIDIA, Zoom Text. There are some big ones out there that will read the contents of the screen to me and let me navigate it, get me from place to place, even if I can't read it and see the items that are on the screen. The neat thing about Canvas is, and if I right click on this and go down to inspect, I don't know how big this is going to be. It might be a little bit hard to see for folks in the back, but if I look at the code behind the heading that's there, in the code here, you can see that Canvas coded the course title, Web Accessibility Specialist, with a H2 right there. Sorry for the folks that are looking at this online. It's about midway through the strings of code there. Canvas did that by itself. Whoever built this page didn't go in and write the code to make this code happen. But Canvas, when you're setting this page up, will list things that are headings with tags in the JavaScript to say it's a heading. Why is that important for somebody to be able to perceive that who's using screen reading software that might be not able to see, low vision or blind? Because this page has a whole lot of text on it, right? And if you're not familiar with the way screen reading software work for folks who are blind, when they come to this page and this page loads, their software will say, this is the Web Accessibility Specialist Learning Community. And it will tell them that if there are 3 or 4 different headings or subheadings on the page, it lets them navigate through the page without having to start up at home and hear the computer voice say, home, announcements, syllabus, module, reading the whole thing. And they're like, I don't care about that. I just want to know what the program description is. So because Canvas will tag this automatically as a heading for you, the software will pick up there are so many headings on this page, and we can figure out how to navigate it through that. So perceivable. Any questions on that? Far in the technology weeds, pulling the code up on that. After P came O. Remember what O was for?
Operable.
Operable, right? We're doing an operable. The easiest way to test for operability on your Canvas page, your Google pages, things like that you may have set up to see if it's going to be operable generally for students to be able to do this, is to take your left index finger, might be your right index finger if you're a lefty, and go to the tab button on your keyboard and start pushing tab and see if interactive elements on the page get highlighted and are focused on. And on this one, it does. As I'm tabbing through, it's going through different objects that are built into the web page, into the LMS, that are clickable, like the syllabus here. And this is nice even still too, because it highlights, it has a little border around the outside to do that. It doesn't just go to syllabus. It gives me that visual representation that that's where I'm going to. And if you hit shift, fancy little trick too, and hit tab, you should go backwards in the tab order that you just went to. Great way to test for operability in your LMS is if it works with tab order, again, somebody who's using a switch or a screen reader, something like that, is going to be able to navigate through this Canvas page and hit the highlights in general. The other thing to look for too, again, operable is pretty simple to be able to check, is to take your little cursor and hover over text that's on the page and see if you get that text caret. Again, not to go too far down the technology weeds, but if you hover over text that's on the page and you can highlight it like this, then this is coded as text in the HTML behind this page. And somebody who uses assistive technology to read it is going to be able to access this text and have it read aloud to them. Images of text, bad, 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 bad. And my IT friends and folks we've worked through over the past few years about websites and website accessibility and all of that, I know folks still have nightmares about having to go back through their school's web pages and LMSs and get the inaccessible stuff off and talk about this, right? Because how do websites work, particularly school websites? We put stuff on there and we don't ever take them off. And the stuff's been on there for 20 years, right? So we had 20 years of stuff to go back to, all the way back to when Mrs. Brown had put the lunch menu on in 1996, right? To be able to do that. So those two things will help you test operable. Tab through, highlight your text to see if it is, and see if there's any on there that doesn't work. Let's go to understandable. We can go through this one pretty quickly. This is a college level Canvas page here, right? Got a lot of things going on. There's some assumptions on this page that you are an experienced Canvas user, that you know how the navigation works over here on the left-hand side. You read all this text, you've got your to-dos over here and all of that. There's a lot of assumptions behind this page that you are of a certain level of experience in using Canvas. The nice thing about Canvas and Google Classroom, and I'm assuming Microsoft Teams too, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you can reduce a lot of this stuff, right? So over here on Canvas, I usually recommend with folks who are using it that they pretty much have home and modules over there and then kind of let it go from there. There are, of course, arguments to be made to be able to find the syllabus there, et cetera. It's really going to be kind of class dependent. If you're, doing advanced chemistry in 11th grade, you may need a few more tabs. But again, know your students in your classroom. The more simple you can make the navigation, the better it's going to be for students with disabilities to be able to find things. The fewer choices and really streamlining these things are better we get the students with hidden disabilities too. And the navigation is just better for everybody. And then last, I gave you, U was understandable. What was R? Robust, right? And we won't bother popping out to look at this, but I promise you, with Canvas, if I look at this in Firefox, or if I look at it in Safari, or I look at it on my phone, it's going to render just about the same as it does on this. So Canvas passes those accessibility checkpoints. All right, let's go back. Awesome. You see everybody again. So we're thinking poor. How did it look on Canvas? And then why is accessibility in an LMS important? Well, I think we know the answer to that. We all have about 13% of our school division populations have IEPs. So that's a pretty big segment. And even beyond that, there are students who haven't been identified as having a disability or have an individualized education plan who can benefit from your LMS being more accessible and more streamlined for them. And when I had originally made this presentation a long time ago, what I had in mind was good old Friday the 13th, 2020, right? The day when we all left school thinking we were going to get an extended spring break that turned into 18 months or so of pushing everybody from the classroom onto learning management systems, some more fully developed at that point than others. And in some cases, this was the impetus for developing a learning management system for K-12 students in general. And not only, this is just my graphic or animation for doing this, was we just moved everybody, including students with disabilities, into that sort of cohort of students that are learning at home. And I have to say, things don't change in education or in just life in general often, unless there's some pain, right, in doing that. We have talked, I can remember, about web accessibility and document accessibility and assistive technology and things like that for years. Make a lot of traction, but until it really starts to hit the fan, and it is still relevant now, it really starts to hit the fan with complaints about inaccessible documents on your website. Students that have visual impairments are now forced to learn at home. They're not necessarily motivated to make the changes that need to be made to be able to do this. So all of that is in the past, I hope, for us. Knocking hard on that wood that at least the worst of it is in the past for us now. But all of the information that we learned about the importance of accessible learning management systems in the past year are still relevant today, because now we still are using them, right? You're still using Google Classroom, you're still using Canvas. There's still going to be students who are learning remotely, even though we are back to having in-person class for the most part all the time. That student who got ill, that student who had an accident, the student that may be out for any number of reasons can now access a more robust platform than they did before. And we need to make sure that it's accessible for them. So you may have been checking on your LMS while I was talking there, scanning your text and tabbing through to see what was going on, things like that, maybe checking your code, seeing if your images had alt text and all that sort of good stuff. You might be wondering about it, but I sort of gave this away at the beginning, that if your school division's using one of these, and I'm sure Microsoft Teams is the same too, that you can celebrate. Your LMS itself is accessible, because most of the major learning management system vendors have worked really extensively on the accessibility of their products. And in the resources for this that you can find in the SCED, I have the presentation up there, and each of these are links to the major learning management system accessibility pages that will take you through everything, all the features and settings that are available on each one of these to make them more accessible to individuals with disabilities. Over on the other side is the major LMS VPATs. And VPATs, again, alphabet soup. Would you go get me a can from the grocery store or some alphabet soup as we go through here? Are the voluntary product accessibility templates, where they don't just go through their settings and say, okay, in Canvas accessibility and Blackboard accessibility, you can turn on a high contrast mode for a student that has low vision to be able to turn the background black and the text white, even if it's not written that way up front. The VPATs will tell you how each one of these LMSs score against a set of accessibility criteria. And they're really useful for people in procurement if you are looking sometime in the near future, or you're assessing or evaluating your LMS right now, and you want to see kind of how Google scores against accessibility criteria versus Blackboard or Canvas or something like that. The VPATs will show you. They will say, we meet what's called WCAG. I refuse to do any more acronyms today, so I refuse to do that. The set of standards out there, we meet level AA on all of these. There's single A, AA, and AAA is the highest, kind of the brass ring that you go for. We're AA on all these things. We're single A on some of these features, but we're working on it. And then there's a couple of things we're AAA on. We're really great. And kind of compare what that means to you and being able to do that. So those are available for you to take a look at too. I kind of mentioned this already. A voluntary product accessibility template. It's a document that explains how much information and communication technology products such as software, hardware, and electronic content conform to 508 standards for IT accessibility. So again, it's a procurement looking document to be able to do that. A couple of just sort of homemade rule of thumb suggestions for you that I found over the course of time. It should be easy to find your LMS's VPAT online. If they make it hard to find, that's a red flag. To be able to do that, you should be able to pretty much Google Blackboard VPAT, and it should be one of the first things that comes up to do that. I would worry if they don't have it listed in a place where you can find it really simply. The last one there, you can use, there's a link there as well, a VPAT template that's blank to allow you to access your own LMS. And is at Roanoke City, used to, right, Britt? Use Moodle quite a lot. So their homemade LMS that they built and controlled on their own servers. Moodle has a VPAT template, but if you're creating something on your own, that's a template you can use to kind of assess it as well and looking at it to see if you need to move in a different direction or what you're doing is pretty good. All right, man, I'm still on time. We're halfway through and it is 30 minutes in. Anybody have questions about that? Is this something that anybody has really thought about before? Sort of, yeah.
To post stuff on our district's website. I've often thought, not known, but often thought, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Our district is part of a class action lawsuit across the country that
Oh.
needed to go up and clean their website out. So we had a crash course on alt images with alt text
That's
and tabbing through and that kind of stuff. And we've learned a lot and we've applied a lot and it's opened my eyes a lot.
Yeah.
I am here
Yep.
in this session for a reason.
Awesome. Well, it is a big thing. And again, I hate that it takes litigation and complaints and things like that to move some of these things sometime, because I can stand here, I mean, all's well that ends well, right? I can stand here and will just honestly tell you that, you know, it will make accessible websites and learning materials and stuff are better for everybody. They're less cluttered, they're a lot more streamlined. The code is simpler, so there's fewer chances for bugs. And I didn't even touch it that time, so I don't know what's going on. I was gonna set it down and talk here, but now we're gonna kind of get to the rub in the second half. So everybody take a cleansing breath. I told you the good news first, all right? That if you're using a major LMS, the LMS itself is accessible because Google and Blackboard and Canvas and all of those guys have taken great pains because they want to sell their LMS to the government too, to make sure that it is all meeting 508 standards and it can be purchased. So they are, when you load Google Classroom, when you load Canvas with nothing on it, that thing is going to be accessible. All right. There might be some little things in it that are, they're working on that aren't the best. But you know that up front and you're doing your due diligence on it. So you knowing that your LMS is accessible, what's the next step? And dating myself here too, but Paul Harvey, if you remember him from the radio back in the day, he used to say, and now for the rest of the story, right? With your learning management system and your teacher's classroom pages and stuff like that, which is where we get to that the accessibility of your LMS interface is only one part of what makes an accessible LMS. It's only one part of the solution. The other two parts are your teachers, the classroom teachers, and your student users at the end. So we started easy. We're like, we're taking a bike ride. We're here in the mountains, right? So we like to mountain bike here around Roanoke. So we started slow on level ground, and we're going to move up the hill a little bit now. So I like this image of a tripod to discover or to kind of discuss accessible virtual learning or digital learning if your students are they're in the classroom, but they're still accessing the platform. In that, tripods are stable, right? You have all three legs. One goes, it's going to fall over, but a tripod with three is even more of a stable base than a four-legged table or something like that, those options. But when we talk about accessible virtual learning, the three pillars that are going to hold it up are your LMS, sort of in the middle, your teachers, and your students, and looking at that. So preaching to the choir on this one, but teachers can easily create inaccessibilities on your learning management system. So like we said, you use loaded Canvas, you loaded Blackboard, Google Classroom up on the computer, accessible. It's a clean slate, right? No trouble at all. Until Mrs. Brown or Mr. Green over at Sunnyside High School uploads a video onto it that doesn't have captions or something like that. And then that's all that it takes for your LMS to no longer be accessible. And talking about, putting documents up that don't contain proper heading structures, images and graphics that don't have all text. Boy, and don't think that this is something that is unique to educational websites either. You could load any website you want on right now. You could go to CNN.com, ESPN.com, Amazon, or whatever. And there are a number of different little accessibility extensions you can put on Chrome. One I like, there's one called AXS. That's a good one if you kind of like to be nerdy with the code. It's a good one. Wave, W-A-V-E, is another good free one. It's a little bit more for beginners in this area, but you can go to any of those pages, run those extensions, and you're going to see they're replete with inaccessibilities on there. But, we're in education, right? So we're always supposed to be trying harder to do this better. So just don't think that it is a problem with education and doing it. And I just sort of like this graphic because it makes me think it's not necessarily educationally oriented, but it's just the spaghetti of all the things that go into trying to manage an LMS in a large public school system to be able to do that, because you have literally hundreds, and in some case thousands of teachers who are uploading stuff to their Google Classrooms and their stuff all the time, right? So how do you stay on top of this to be able to do it? It's just, it's a whirlwind of things getting uploaded, and it's so fragile that it almost seems like you can't do anything about it. And I talk to tech directors, I talk to special ed teachers, I talk to ITRTs about this stuff all the time. And I have to encourage them, because it does seem like it can be an insurmountable task to try to do this. And again, a lot of folks have had some bad experiences over the past few years with websites, alt text, class action lawsuits, and things like that put accessibility in sort of it doesn't have the sweetest taste in their mouth when they start talking about it. That's what they go back to thinking about. So what I typically suggest folks do is draw a line and start now going forward, because it is much easier to tell teachers and work with them that documents, PowerPoints, slideshows, PDFs, videos that you make from this day forward, we'll worry about the stuff you've already made. We'll get to that. But from now forward, we're going to work on making things accessible. Okay, because it's always easier to make it accessible the first time than it is to go back and fix a whole bunch of things that you messed up after you already completed everything. You got it looking just the way you want it. Then you have to go make it accessible, and that's no fun. I never like to give or talk with teachers or coaches, you should do this, without giving them some sort of helping hand or resource to help them. And that's what these are for. And we'll look at them briefly a little bit here. And I would encourage you to share these with the folks that you coach and work with as well on this. Not everything on the VOE website is real great. The website itself can be kind of hard to navigate and look through and find what you're looking for. But these things are great. There are 4 accessibility checklists and guidance documents that the DOE has on its website. And again, they're linked there. And this is an example of what the word checklist looks like. And it can be a front page and a back page, so it's not overwhelming, but it just takes you through what you need to do from a basic standpoint to make sure that document, and this goes for Word and Google documents. I know it says Word at the top, but it's pretty much the same in doing it. As you go through, did you set a file type and name? Did you use appropriate font and style? Did you use built-in lists, columns, et cetera? As you go through, you look at your document, you pull out your checklist, and you say, okay, I got this, done. Makes it a little easier to be able to do that and go through, okay? And of course, using the accessibility checker that's on the end. When it comes to documents in particular, since Word is what we started with there and looking at, sort of start with this there, and it's the most common one that's used out there, Word and Google Documents. It's a lot about breaking habits when we talk about using or creating accessible documents with it. Who, and I'll put myself up there first, thought that all these little menu buttons at the top of Word that have like headings and stylings and all that sort of stuff were just sort of nice things that we never used? Like, that's for power users, right? When I make a document, you know what I do? I click in the middle and I center it, and I type my title, and I highlight it, and I make it 60-point font, and I make it bold. I have a title, right? That's the heading of my paper. That's what I did for years. I'm the first to be guilty with that. But from an accessibility standpoint, that is not a title, and is going to set off a flag if you, under review, you guys know about the accessibility checkers on Word, right? Or should I show you that? No? Yes? Yes? Okay. Oh, you know about the accessibility checker on Word?
We don't use.
You've never used it?
We use
Okay.
Google, so.
Okay, and there's some things for Google too that I can show you. I'll show you that on slides. On Word,
Check accessibility.
if you're there, this is just a Word document I pulled up. And this is, of course, Word for Mac. Under Review, the Review tab here, there's a Check Accessibility button that will show you what's screwed up. And there's a lot of mistakes on this page. Images, wouldn't you know it? 37 of them. objects that are not in line, tables, tables, don't even get me started. The thing I like about the word accessibility checker, and it's not showing me a whole lot right now. Maybe if I can click on that. Yep. Down here at the bottom, it's very explicit into telling you why you should fix this and how you should fix it. The steps to be able to do it, to be able to fix these things, the alerts that it pops up in there, to be able to do that. When it comes to Word and document accessibility, there's remediation like this, fixing the document, reviewing it once you've tried it, and then fixing it later. And then there is, again, making it accessible the first time. And that, I go back to that biting the fingernails picture. It's all about breaking habits, being like I was, and just making my titles that way and not using the headings. Oh, goodness. Sorry for everybody. We're going to go back through a thing. Get back to where we were. You get the review of the presentation. It's all about breaking habits and using these tools. If you use your headings, buttons that are up here, and I would get the feedback, oh, Matt, I don't like how my heading looks whenever I use the heading 1 button to make the title of my page. It turns it blue into a font that I don't like. Well, that's okay. Do it and then go back and restyle. Make it into your scripty fonts. I wouldn't suggest that. Times New Roman of a certain font size and bold it, and it will retain the heading tag. So again, when somebody who's using screen reading software comes to that page, now maybe we're not talking about a document in 3rd grade that is a page long, but if we're talking about a secondary document that a student is looking at that's several pages long, it'll allow them to find the section of the paper that they want to read without having to listen to the whole thing being read to them in doing that. Do things like your bullets, your numbered lists, all of that stuff that we sort of skip over, just as guilty. Make myself a list, 1 dot, start typing, enter 2 dot, enter, making my list like that, right? To do that. If you're not using these tools, it's not being marked in the code of the document, what that is, and how the user who may be using assistive technology can navigate it. So to think about that. Again, it's breaking habits that we've done for years, and that's hard. But talking with folks about, okay, starting now, when I start to make a document, I'm going to use that heading button to make my main title. I think I advertised in the description of this session that you take away a couple of things that can help you make more accessible things really easy in like less than 30 seconds. There's one of them. Use the heading button on Word, and there's on Google Documents too, to be able to do that. So use those. PowerPoint and Google Slides. There is another checklist on the BPOE webpage for making accessible PowerPoint and Google Slides presentations as well, to be able to do this, that after you have gone through it, you can go through and check here and check here to say, okay, this looks good to go. This also impacts Bitmoji Classrooms. Oh boy, did we see a lot of those pop up over the course of the last year or two in doing that. And God bless and thankful for all the teachers who made these really creative experiences for students to be able to, you know, in an emergency situation, feel like they were in a virtual setting and doing all that. But these bad boys can be even more of a nightmare for somebody who is using assistive technology to try to navigate and move through than documents. Because you know how PowerPoint and Google Slides are layers, right? How the first thing that you put on is at the bottom of the stack. And even though you don't see it, it gets stacked over time, right? And that's the order that somebody who would come to this slide, who would tab through it, we talked about tabbing earlier, how they would experience it. And I know when I was in the classroom, I was never so organized. I'd be like, okay, I have my title in mind. Here's my title. And now I'm going to put the first thing I want them to see and the second thing I want to see in perfect order. I would, you know, I'd build the slide as it came to me. And I'm like, oh, it would be nice if I had a, you know, a tiger face up there in the left-hand corner. I want to put that up there now and do that. And then moving on down the road, not thinking that somebody working their way through that, that may have a disability and uses some assistive technology, is going to be jumping from create to the dog saying, I'm Matisse, the art dog, welcome, up to the clock, up down to the trash can, in the order that I put things on the slide, without putting them in a more proper order to be able to do that. So the Bitly that's over there on the left is a little series of playlists that I made last year that are little, gosh, I think they're 2 or 3 minute long, each one of them. That if you're building something like this, way to check yourself along the way that it's accessible. So you don't have to go back and make a lot of changes to it at the end. But yeah, oh boy, PowerPoints. They can be, and Google Slides, they can be something. But you brought up Google Documents just a minute ago. And I wanted to pop out just for a second and throw myself under the bus real quick here and show you a Google Slides presentation that I made in a big hurry right before Thanksgiving, just a little while ago, for assistive technology for literacy. If you happen to be a Google division, and I know a lot of folks are, you don't have the built-in accessibility checker like the Word products do. The Microsoft products have that in there. There is an add-on that you can get though called Grackle. You've seen Grackle? Okay, it's called Grackle, like crackle with a G. And it's an add-on that you can activate. You can see that up there. And I'm going to show you just what a mess this presentation that I made was. It's going to process for just a second here, because I did it to present to a live audience and not post it online anywhere for somebody to be able to access. So I don't feel too awful about not going through, not practicing what I preach here. But in a moment after it processes, there we go. You can see that I had a title, my document language is specified and all that. I skipped over a lot of titles on slides, which is a big no-no in PowerPoint and Google Slide accessibility. Every title, every slide needs to have a title on it. Again, so somebody using a screen reader, you have a 75-page long slide long presentation. They want to know about a certain thing. It's almost like a table of contents for them. Yes.
Can I ask a really girly, make it pretty question?
Absolutely. I think I have the answer for what you're about to say.
So if I do it in white, the title,
Perfectly
like
fine.
if I use the titles, like back layout or whatever,
Yep.
and I just make it white
So it
that
doesn't
you
show
can't
up.
see it, and I can still put my alt text title picture over top of it.
Yep.
Or for whatever else I wanted, it's still, so if you were screen reading, that would still work,
It would
right?
still, because they don't care what color it is. Something else that I do with it too, that you can do if you don't want to do that, is drag it off the slide, your title box. And then you don't even have to have it, but it's still there. But you're going to get this alert that slide should have a title, that table of contents on these, and you'll see that on the checklist too. So when folks say, oh, I want to make my slide look great, I don't want a title on every slide. Well, okay, it doesn't have to show up, but white, so it blends in with the background, or drag the title box off the viewable area.
I know the answer to my question, but in the past, I've done things where I put things in the speaker notes. That doesn't count.
No, speaker notes are not.
Not reading those. It's
As
for
a
my
user, if you needed those to be accessible, but not for the person who's viewing your speaker to be able to do that. So that works on PowerPoint and on Google Slides too. Just drag that title off there. But Grackle, it's not free. Well, I tell you what, at least it used to be that Grackle, and I haven't checked this, I'm sorry, I'll do that before the session tomorrow. They'll get the best updated information. But Grackle will check for free. There's a subscription. It's not freemium, but if you pay the subscription for it, it will then also tell you how to fix things. That's what you kind of pay for. But even after your free trial is over, it will tell you what's wrong. So hopefully during the trial, you start to notice what the alerts mean. And you say, okay, so the tables aren't tagged, the slide's missing a title, or they're not unique titles. This is what I need to do to fix those things. See. All right, I'm going to try to not go back to the beginning again. Yes, I did. PDF. There are so many scanned PDFs and things out there in the education system. And I'll tell you, I'll call myself an expert in document accessibility. And AIM, what it stands for is accessible instructional materials, by the way. I should have said that earlier. PDF accessibility is very, very difficult to make PDFs accessible, even for experienced people to do. It is time consuming and it is extremely difficult. The suggestion I've given to school divisions and people that work in this area is to just say no to PDF going forward when possible. There are a lot of good reasons why PDF existed in the past, and there still are today. I think a lot of folks I know that I've worked with come under the faulty notion that PDF, just because it's a PDF, that it's a secure document that nobody can change. And that's not true unless you turn on certain settings in the PDF. Just because something's a PDF doesn't mean that you can't edit it to do that. It's a small file format, which made it easy to save and email and things like that. And it would open on any computer, right? You didn't need a special software. You have Adobe Reader, but there's a bunch of different things that would open PDF. It wasn't like this is a Microsoft thing, this is an Apple thing, or whatever. So there were a lot of reasons why PDFs were out there. With things like Word Online, Google Docs Online, and things now where size of file is such a small, thing that we're worried about now. Things are shareable. I really encourage you as coaches, talking to the teachers that you're working with, to try not to work with PDF. We know we have a lot of them that need to be fixed in the past, but again, let's draw that line now and move forward using less of it. Because if you begin with PDF with people, you're going to lose them, because it's hard to make PDFs accessible. They have some amazing features and can be some of the most accessible documents for folks who know how to do them, but the process is very complex, tedious, and time consuming. So long story short, if you can use something other than PDF, the accessibility gods will thank you on that. You need Adobe Acrobat to be able to do that right too, which is not a cheap program to have. And not everybody is probably, unless your division buys a license for everybody to have it, not everybody is probably going to have it. And even fewer people are going to be trained on how to use it. And it totally cuts out Chromebook users. There is Adobe Acrobat, an extension on Chrome, but it doesn't work very well. It's not like the full featured thing. So if you do want to dip your little toe into making PDFs accessible, because sometimes it is necessary, this website is called PAVE, pavepdf.org. It is a web cloud-based PDF accessibility checker that will tell you where there's errors and give you some feedback about how to fix them. You can see there's a size limit to the file that you can put up there. So that can kind of be some crimp in your style in doing that with 5 megabytes. And then the one below is a checker that the VDOE recommends that goes up to 10, but it will just tell you something's wrong with something. Hey, will actually give you some of the steps to fix it too. So take a look at that if you have the time to be able to do it. Video accessibility. We're getting down towards the end. I don't feel like I need to belabor this too much with folks, but just remember captioning. I think everybody got on the caption train last year with so many students working remotely. No, the auto captions that YouTube generates are not good enough by themselves. They need to go in and adjust them and edit them and all that. It's a good start. But I usually find, rule of thumb, that twice the length of the video is about how long it takes me to edit the captions and make them correct. So if it's a 2 or 3 minute long video, you can go in the editor and probably get it done in 5 or 6 minutes. So once you kind of get the hang of it, it's kind of get your cadence down to going through and changing things and all of that. So it's another, kind of plug or gold star for making short videos, which is what people want to watch anyway, right? We don't want to watch 30-minute long videos. We want something short that we can consume and move on. So just be sure you're going in and editing your captions, whether you're YouTube folks, you might use Kaltura. I think a lot of the educational video platforms now do automatic captioning. You have fairly easy editor to be able to do that. So just remember your captions. Some things I'll leave you with. Options for additional professional learning in these areas, because we just scratched the surface with all of these, and you can share these with your folks if you want, or if you want to take a look at them as well. This link will take you to a webinar series. They're each they're between 30 minutes and an hour each. As I just said, 2 or 3 minute videos are best. But these are the full length Word and Google document accessibility, slides, PDFs, and videos that you can take people to see. They really want to get down into the nitty gritty of learning how to do this. And you get PD credit from watching these as well. You can print a certificate and get all that good stuff on there too. And that link will take you to those. And you might even hear a familiar voice on some of those webinars as well. So we kind of covered the teacher there, the biggest part. The last little bit here is just going to be able to focus on the student. And the students are so individual and unique. I know the teachers are too, but we can kind of group them a little bit better with how we're going to try to teach them or work on them with these things. The students are so unique. They really have to be case-by-case based individual cases, but just don't forget about the student component in all of this as well. If your LMS is accessible and your content is accessible, but your students with disabilities don't have the assistive technology they need, or they don't know how to use what they have, their screen reading software, their adapted mouse, something like that, then that third leg on our tripod of accessible digital and virtual learning is going to still fall over to do there. We don't want accessibility to stop there, particularly when we think about, this is just a picture I pulled from a Google presentation I was in a few years ago about all the features that are built in to the Chromebooks and iPads and things that they have now. Now, used to be in IT, and I understand why a lot of these settings are initially turned off, but have those conversations with your folks about why these are important. For certain groups, if you make a group of Chromebooks where some of these features are turned on if they're needed, that's something that you can look at doing as well. And just remember that students may need to be given some practice, and you as ITRTs and the technology coaches in your buildings and in your division, I just encourage you that just like any other piece of software, you got to practice it to be able to use it, right? The best way to learn to use these things is actually put your hands on it and doing it. And the students aren't going to be any different in that respect. But because each student's needs and tools are so specific, we recommend that if you have an AT team or assistive technology team in your division, I think some of you do, so you're heading on, that's awesome. We're working all the time to keep building these teams, and they're coming online and emerging more and more now. You can talk with them or the TTACs in your region, folks like me that can help you learn ways that you can coach students using their AT and accessibility tools to access virtual learning and your guys' LMS. We're out there all the time. We're free. We love to answer questions. Just reach out anytime. We're your friend up in the air to do that. And when you have these three things looking strong, I know easier said than done, but then you have accessible virtual learning. Congratulations in doing this. But I just kind of close out by saying and reminding you that it's not an all or nothing proposition, this, because we talked about alternative text on websites and documents and how many scanned PDFs of ancient books are out there that are not accessible and things like that. Don't let the folks you work with think that, if I can't do it all, this semester, if I can't do it all this school year, I'm not even going to start. It's just too much going on. There's always lots going on in the life of a teacher. Always. More so now than ever, but there's always tons going on. But just making progress in the right direction, starting using those headings, making sure that you're Google Slides are in proper order when you tap through them. That the text on your Canvas page is actual text and not an image of a text or something like that. Progress in the right direction is going to benefit your students in doing that. So if I left you with more questions and answers, I'm not surprised, but I will stop talking and I'll leave you with my email address there. And even if you're not from my region, if you happen to be from other places, the JMU region, you'd definitely be talking, sending you back to me. No, just kidding. Feel free to reach out to me anytime with this. And I'll be happy to talk to you more about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So how does the state consider? The speech to text feature, but it doesn't do the damages.
My guess is that a student who was using that, they would probably give them alternative, like the paper pencil of that, if there was going to be like a graphic or something on there
Yeah,
that was difficult to describe
that's the only thing.
to do that.
Did TTAC across the state have any role in creating AXS? You know that?
No, we did not create it. No, we
Did you
are,
assist in any way?
we are, yes,
Okay.
the VSOL, Virginia Centralized
Right.
Standards of Learning. No, we are in the process of helping to create resources for in coaching and working with teachers who are dealing with that right now.
Okay.
That was something that change was something that came down from the US Department of Ed that said that we can't do our portfolio